following program is sponsored by Mission America and may contain views and opinions that do not reflect the views of the advertisers, staff, and owners of this station. Some material may not be suitable for children. Listener discretion is advised.
Yeah, I used to be a liberal too.
Reproductive health includes contraception and family planning and access to legal, safe abortion.
For me personally, it is important for me to go ahead and affirm that I think same-sex couples should be able to get married.
Yeah, I used to be a liberal too.
This is Mission America with Linda Harvey.
Because with God,
all things
are still possible.
Good afternoon, listeners, to Mission America Radio. Mark Harrington sitting in for Linda today. We appreciate you tuning in. I am your radio activist back on the air here at WRFD, and good news is we'll be actually starting a program here again in March. I'll be following Linda at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturdays. I will be back on the air on WRFD. It'll be the Mark Harrington Show. Your radio activist will be back on the air. We'll be talking about the issues that confront us as a nation, primarily on the question of abortion, but we'll get into other things, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But it's a privilege to be on the program, to sit in for Linda today. And folks, if you're not supporting her ministry, I ask you to do so. There are very few people in America, in the culture wars, so-called, like Linda Harvey, who are on the front lines of the agenda of the radical homosexuals. And she's really fighting the good fight, and I couldn't suggest it more to you to send her a gift, support her financially if at all possible. Well, today's program, I want to talk a little bit about 41 years of decriminalized abortion. We just came off of the annual March for Life, which is the remembrance of the Roe versus Wade decision. I was in Washington, D.C. for that, and we set up our Jumbotron TV screen on the March route, and that is we play abortion video on a large LED as marchers pass by, and we feel it's important that we represent the victims of abortion at their own march. So that's why we're there. So I was in Washington. It's now 41 years. I've been in this battle at some level or another for almost 20 years myself. And frankly, when I got involved, I didn't think we'd be doing this now. I thought that it would be over, that the nation would eventually have woken up to the fact that we are shedding innocent blood, and that a nation cannot last very long or endure who does that to its own children. But it's happening still, 41 years. The good news is that we have not grown weary in doing good. There's been a lot of recent developments just in the past several years that have shown that we're making progress. And we'll talk about that. But what I wanted to point out is I was in Washington, and every time I go there, I reflect upon my love-hate relationship for that city. On the one hand, you have all this history all over, everywhere you go, Christian history. The foundations of Christianity in America are everywhere to be seen. And on the flip side of that, you have this monstrous federal leviathan, this gigantic federal government that is out of control, that is in everybody's pocket, that has changed America to a more socialist state. And it's a very difficult visit for me, because we're not what we used to be. And the federal government is more dysfunctional than it's ever been. I imagine you've noticed lately, haven't you? Nothing gets done in Washington, almost nothing. And that may be a good thing right now because of the president that we have in the White House, that things are on a gridlock, but very little gets done. And especially on the issue of abortion, almost nothing is getting done. Now, that's not a good thing. If you're a pro-life advocate like myself, you want to see legal protection back to the preborn, but there's a reason why it's dysfunctional. And that's because most of our representatives are there not to represent the people, but for their own furtherment or what have you. Which brings me to this parable that Jesus laid out for us in the Scriptures. And it's the parable of the unrighteous judge, or what some call the persistent widow. And Jesus says this. He goes, as he tells this story, he says he was telling them a parable to show them that at all times they ought to pray and not lose heart, saying, in a city there was a judge who did not fear God and did not respect man. There was a widow in that city, and she kept coming to him, saying, give me legal protection from my opponent. For a while he was unwilling. But afterward he said to himself, even though I do not fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow bothers me, I will give her legal protection. Otherwise, by continually coming, she will wear me out. And I believe that this parable has contemporary application to us today as it relates to the abortion issue. And that is, you have a certain man, a judge in a city, who is unwilling to grant legal protection to this widow. Sounds like our United States Supreme Court, a court that is not listening to the will of the people, that is not being righteous, a righteous judge or judicial, judging rightly, and has permitted the killing of unborn children now for 41 years. So it's an unrighteous judge or unrighteous Supreme Court that we have, and so there's a connection there. But you have this widow who's calling for legal protection. Doesn't that sound familiar? Isn't that what we want for the preborn? Protection, legal protection from the slaughter. But in this parable, it says that the unrighteous judge did not fear God or respect man. But because she bothered him, he gave her legal protection. Because he wore him out, he granted the protection she desired. And see, that's kind of what we have going on here. After 41 years, pro-life advocates like myself, anti-abortion activists, are continuing to battle to protect preborn babies. And we are continuing to persevere even after 41 years. And I think that eventually, because we bother folks, because we wear them out, this will be a battle of attrition. The last man standing will win the day. And we have the fortitude to continue the fight, even if it doesn't look all that promising at this point. Now, of course, we serve a righteous judge, not an unrighteous one. We do not find our, morality or what have you in the United States Supreme Court. We look to a righteous judge, and that righteous judge is a good judge. Unlike the unrighteous judge, he's going to judge rightly, and he eventually will, in my opinion, grant legal protection for the unborn, one way or the other. One way or the other, whether it's going to be through legal means that we pursue through our political process here in America, or eventually God will grant it through a judgment of this country. One way or the other, it's going to happen. I believe it. So there is some correlation between this parable here and what we find ourselves dealing with today as it relates to abortion and the situation in Washington, D.C. Now, on the good side of this, that's kind of the bad news, that we face a very tough fight. We're up against it when it comes to trying to protect preborn babies. But the good news is we're making progress, albeit gradual and slower than I'd like. Recently, the Alan Guttmacher Institute, which is the research arm to Planned Parenthood, has come out with some findings. And they have found, recently, this came out just about a week ago, that abortions in America are at the lowest rate they have been since 1973. The lowest rate. That's 41 years now. We are at the lowest rate we have been since Roe versus Wade. And, of course, the liberal media wants to spin this to say that this has most to do with birth control, which it might, but I have a different perspective. I think there are two main reasons why the abortion rate is going down in America, and has been for several years, and that is that that is partly due because the state legislatures are passing laws like never before. In fact, in the last 2 years, there have been more pro-life pieces of legislation passed into law than had been passed in the entire decade prior, which is huge. Think about that. There's been a huge increase of pro-life laws being passed in the years of from 2011 to 2013. And contrary to the liberal spin that say that there's no correlation to more anti-abortion laws in one state and a decrease in abortion, which is untrue, they have found that these states that are passing these abortion limitations or bans are actually reducing abortion in those states. And that we are at historic lows in some of these states that are consistently passing more pro-life laws. So that's good news. There have been 39 states enacted 141 pro-life provisions in 2012. That's a lot. Ohio being one of the leading states that have done that. Another good indication that this is going in the right direction is that in 2012 alone, 87 abortion clinics closed their doors. Hallelujah! 87 abortion mills closed their doors last year. That's a 73% decrease since 1991. In 1991, there were 2,176 abortion centers in this country. Over 2,000. Now, in 2014, there are only 582. And I say only, I mean one would be too many, but that's a huge, massive decrease, 73%. And that's good news, real good news. So there are indications that this is going in the right direction, and it's almost counterintuitive to all the other social indicators, such as public opinion on gay marriage, for an example, or opinion on the legalization of marijuana or decriminalization of marijuana. Those social indicators are going in another direction to more liberal laws regarding those two things, where on abortion it's becoming more conservative. The laws are becoming more conservative, which is counterintuitive in a sense to what's happening in the culture as a whole. And I attribute that to one main thing, and that is technology. We are now able, through technology, have a window to the womb. The ultrasound images that we are all now familiar with are very prevalent in our culture and used in media and so forth. And we can no longer deny that this entity that's now growing in the womb of a woman is a human being from conception. That's really not disputed anymore, and it's because of the technology as to why we believe that as Americans. So that has had a huge impact on public opinion. The other thing is the stuff that we do, and that is showing the victims. Not only have we proven that the preborn are human by use of ultrasound and other technologies, But we are also proving that abortion is a horrific act of violence that kills a baby. Through photos and video that we have created and brought to the fore, Americans now know how much abortion takes the life of a preborn baby. And so those two things alone, I think, have led to this decrease. We got a long way to go, but we're on the right direction. We're going in the right direction. That's the good news. You're listening to Mission America Radio. Mark Harrington sitting in today. You're a radio activist. And we'll be starting a program here in March following Linda Harvey. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.